Hey everyone, it's Missy
and April,
and we are thrilled to be here with our new podcast, Sheela Na Gig. Thank you so much for joining us. We wanted to start out telling you a little bit about what is a Sheela Na Gig. April, can you kind of delve into that for us?
Oh, sure. This really simple explanation about this rather large figure that is found on European buildings, ironically, a lot of churches. And why it's so ironic is because it not only shows female images, but specifically oversized female genitalia.
She said genitalia.
She did. She said genitalia because that's what
Sheela Na Gig
is all about. And you wouldn't think of that on your normal, typical church, but there it is all over Europe.
Yeah, it's true. They think they were carved between the 12th and 17th century. They're figurative carvings. They're actually carved into these buildings. And Ireland had the highest concentration of them. At this point, they have more than 100 of them, but so many of them have been destroyed.
That's a shame.
I know. And the reason being is that, people thought they were disgusting. At some point, people are like, why do these exist? These giant, these figures of these women with a giant vulva, and most of them were kind of haggy looking, and people were offended. They thought they were grotesque, disgusting.
And that's exactly why we're doing this podcast, because we take issue with that image or that distortion of that image, or not distortion, but dislike or criticism of that image.
Yes, it's true. I mean, again, they were initially thought as this grotesque image of like feminine evil, completely derogatory, the embodiment of lust and sin. And they were put up in churches as warnings almost, they think, that's what they used to think at least.
Well, I like to reinterpret it as, or we like to interpret it because we've had a lot of these discussions, you and I, as feminine empowerment.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so more recently, researchers have leaned toward the idea that the Sheela is a pre-Christian folk goddess and her exaggerated vulva a sign of life-giving powers and fertility.
Ooh,
I know. So it's all about, embracing your power, embracing your femininity, celebrating your flesh.
Talk about your breasts and your uterus. Let's go.
Okay, April, calm down a little bit there.
All right, I'm a little excited about this. So anyway, tell us a little bit more about how this podcast evolved from breasts and uterus to a podcast.
Right. Well, I just want to say again, I think April and I are both very proud to be women. And, again, it goes back to that unapologetic female empowerment and sexuality. I read something and it was something like, there's ever such thing as big dick energy. The Sheela Na Gig is the embodiment of big vagina energy.
Woo, baby.
So that's what this podcast is about. Big vagina energy. Repeat after me. Big vagina energy. Okay. So I like to think that we're kind of purveyors of women empowerment.
One of the things that drove me here to this chair today is you, because you are a stylist and a wardrobe artist, and you were very instrumental in helping me embrace my own attractiveness, my own femininity, and it's true.
Beautiful, April. You are beautiful, inside and out.
Well, thank you. But I think that part of what my excitement is in our partnering together and in some of the things that we do together, which I'm sure we'll share over the course of many podcasts, I hope, is really embrace women of all sizes, of all ages, and their beauty.
Yes.
Because there's room for beauty at all ages and stages of life.
This is true. Meet your body where it's at. That's what I always tell my clients. And I try to tell myself that too.
Yes, which is harder, huh?
It's harder to tell myself that. It is. And April's also she's very inspiring. She is a career coach. She's been very instrumental in really helping a lot of women discover who they are and, how they want to portray themselves to the world and how they want to grow into, their power and embrace who they are. And so April is one wonderful. She's so instrumental to so many women and just really kind of developing them and helping them really, see who they are, which I think is really amazing.
Well, thank you. It is one of my more gratifying aspects of my work. While I love working with men too, I like empowering people. And I believe that people of all genders and life experiences have times when they need empowering and they need encouragement. It is particularly gratifying when I work with a woman, and especially when I see her elevate her position, her earnings, and just that boost of self-esteem that comes with the recognition that she's a capable badass.
Yes, a capable badass. I love that. I love that. I think through this podcast, we really want to, focus on being those purveyors of women empowerment. So each episode, we would like to kind of share a different Sheela with you, a different Sheela each episode.
I love that, except for we blew our very first episode.
We did. We blew our first episode. It's true, because we had this idea that we were both going to come to the table with a different woman, and then we were both going to, each separately maybe do one episode with April sharing her woman, me doing an episode sharing my Sheela, But April got here today, and I had this little premonition, and we pulled out our notes, and we wrote about the exact same women.
Yep. What were the odds?
So we've decided for this, our very first episode, we're just going to do it. So we're going to give this a shot. Maybe if we like it, we'll do everyone this way. Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows, right? All right. Sarah Breedlove was born December 23rd, 1867, near Delta, Louisiana. She later became known as Madam C.J. Walker, and today that's what we're going to refer to her as, Madam C.J. Walker.
Why don't you begin by saying, why did you choose Madam C.J. Walker?
Well, I'm just so inspired by her story, and she's a woman who led with strength and perseverance. She's a woman of color, and it was a time when women certainly were not getting their dues. Women were not really looked at as people at that time, To think she was not just the first woman millionaire, she was a black woman. So, that's what's amazing to me.
Part of that was that if she'd been born just like several months earlier, she might have been a slave, because the only reason why she wasn't a slave was because she was born after the Emancipation Proclamation. Her older siblings were slaves.
It's true. It's true. All three of her siblings were slaves. There was Lavina was her oldest sister, and then she had her brothers James and Solomon. They all worked in slavery as sharecroppers, and they worked on a cotton plantation until the end of the Civil War. But by the time she was 7, she lost both of her parents.
Can you believe that?
I know. 7 years old.
Completely orphaned, yeah.
Yeah. So she went to live with her older sister, and that was Lavina.
Mm-hmm.
But her sister was married to a really mean, cruel man.
Yep.
Who was completely abusive to her, forced her to work for the family, just very abusive. And so at the age of 14, she ran away from home, and she married a man named Moses McWilliams. You want to tell us a little bit about that, April?
Well, he was older than her, but we don't know by how much, but he ended up having a short life. He died, and when Sarah was only 20 years old, she was a widow with a daughter. And so she and her daughter had to move to St. Louis, where her brothers lived, so that she could survive.
All of her siblings eventually headed north, and you can see why.
Mm-hmm. And she only had, interestingly enough, 3 months of formal education through Sunday school literacy lessons. And so she moved to St. Louis to try to make ends meet and support her daughter. And she was working as a laundress, barely making more than $1 a day. But she was determined for a different life. She wanted something more for herself and her daughter. And
she was going to night school.
And she started going.
Laundress by day, night school. And her brothers were both barbers. Her brothers were both barbers in St. Louis. And obviously they wanted to escape racial violence, and they wanted to find jobs. And they were able to do that in St. Louis. So, but, throughout her life, Sarah had struggled with hair loss.
Yes.
And it was likely caused by poor nutrition, stress, poverty. Also, the fact that there was really no running water.
Yep.
And so, you really couldn't have the hygiene that you wanted necessarily. And so, like most black women at that time, Sarah was using a lot of harsh soap and heavy oils and grease on her hair, which would only have made her condition worse. So she really had this desire to kind of wrap her head around that and improve it. And in the late 1800s, too, most of the hair products were designed and sold for and to only white women. There were no hair products for black women at that time.
And the good news for her was this was a really untapped market.
Yeah.
And she did start working for another woman.
Yes, Annie Malone.
Who ended up becoming a competitor of hers, but really gave her start. And she began to sell Malone's product. And while she was out selling her product, she developed her own.
And she was only in her early 20s at this time. And shortly after her second marriage, she met somebody else. And it was John Davis, I believe was his name. John Davis. Yep. And unfortunately, he too was abusive, which is just sucks. Mm-hmm. It's just like, you think about such a strong, amazing woman, and here she was just being beaten down, literally, and I mean, she had so much to rise up against,
Yeah, she
did. So much. So yeah, like April said, she was working for Anne Malone, and at the same time developing her own hair care products, and then in 1905, her brothers had both died, which was really sad, and she ended up divorcing John Davis. And she decided, she had a sister-in-law who had moved to Denver. One of her brother's wives had moved to Denver. So she said, you know what, I'm going to Denver. And she worked there as a cook for a pharmacist. And in 1906, she married an ad man. He was a newspaper man named Charles Joseph. He went by C.J. Walker. And then she renamed herself Madam C.J. Walker. That's right.
And the couple ended up divorcing in 1912, but C.J. actually taught her a little bit about marketing, and our heroine ran with that instruction and her own initiative and what she learned working with Annie Malone, and began to sell her own product. And for a while, her husband was her business partner, and then she went off on her own. And she put her daughter in charge of the mail order operation in Denver while she was traveling throughout the South and Eastern United States to expand her business.
It's amazing. Yeah. And it's kind of funny. I thought this was interesting. She called herself Madame. She added that prefix Madame, which really wasn't like the normal thing to do during that time.
Yeah.
But it was associated with the French beauty industry. Mm-hmm. And so by extension, sophistication. So she was seeking to make herself sound more sophisticated, which she surely did. And we were talking about how she was creating her own products, and she launched her hair care line, which was called Madam Walker's Wonderful Hair Grower, with only $1.25. That would be $44.98 today.
That's amazing.
I know. You can launch a business with, $45. That's crazy. And she also began, to do advertising her products in Black publications. Mm-hmm. And she did, like you said, the mail order system. Yep. And then she was also going kind of door to door. And she was so proud of herself that she started putting her own picture on all her advertisements and on her packaging.
Go Sheela Na Gig. At least, well,
go Sheela.
Her face.
Sheela.
Yep. Uh-huh. And she did end up purchasing her own house and factory later on in 1910 in New York City. And she built a hair salon and a beauty school and started to train her sales agent and added a laboratory to help with research. And she assembled a staff that included other Black women and empowered them and taught them her trade and how they too can gain wealth beyond, these low-paying types of jobs.
Yeah. I mean, as business grew too, she created these, like you said, these opportunities. She employed, they think, 40,000 African-American women and men in the U.S., Central America, and the Caribbean. And that's when she also founded the National Negro Cosmetics Manufacturers Association in 1917. And in her first year, she exceeded sales of $500,000.
That's amazing.
I mean, that'd be unheard of for anybody.
Yeah.
You know, she was right up there with the Rockefellers, right?
Right. Only without the privilege, the financial backing, the connections. She did it on her own.
Right. She did. Well, I have to say her husband did help her.
Yes.
I mean, obviously she was who she was. He was an ad man, though, and they did partner. They partnered for quite a while because, you know, he was doing a lot of the advertising. He was an ad man. You know, he was doing a lot of the, like, working with the publications, getting her in the publications. So they were kind of doing it together.
Yeah.
But, you know, this isn't how women acted during that time.
Oh, no. And they divorced and she kept right on going.
I know. So the relationship, of course, it collapsed because he was jealous. There was ambition and drive, and they were, you know, growing apart.
Well, he should be business. She's a badass.
Yeah. And CJ was also an alcoholic.
I didn't know that.
He was, and then he cheated on her with one of her sales agents.
Bummer.
I know. Dora Laurie was, you know, a woman who really didn't have a lot going on for herself, and she hired her and empowered her and, you know, taught her to be a salesperson. And what does she do? She stole her husband.
Oh, man.
I know.
I hate when that happens.
I know. It happens. We don't really know the full stories.
We
I don't want to be too hard. I don't want to be too hard on Dora, but... You know, that's kind of like what I gathered from some of the stuff that I read. But it was interesting because her husband, you know, they divorced, and I guess it was somewhat amicable, you know. I mean, she gave him quite a bit, and, you know, but, you know, he had these repeated requests for money as she continued to be more and more successful.
So wait a minute, because I don't have notes on this. She supported the dude?
No, he had his own stuff going on, but she was way more successful than he was, and he also felt like, he had put some time into it.
So that she owed him
a little bit, yeah. So he was given $35 by Walker upon their divorce, which was considered. We should look that up. Let's see. I don't know. It was considered a lot more then. But he did try to, he wanted to, stay in her good graces. And
after cheating and taking her money. Okay.
But you know, so they were...
Fine, go on.
Yeah, whatever. But he and Laurie went on to get married, and they started their own doomed hair care business called the Walker-Laurie Company.
That's what he gets for competing with her.
Exactly. But soon after, they divorced, as apparently Laurie only wanted the title Madam.
Oh.
And the formula.
Oh.
Yeah, so she she got her Madam. She got the formula. I don't know if she thought she was going to do with it, but yeah.
But on her.
Yeah.
But, you know, let's go back to our heroine, Madam CJ Walker, because, you know, in addition to training salespeople, African-American women of color, she also began to show other Black women how to budget and build their own businesses and encourage them to be financially independent. And she was inspired by the model of the National Association of Colored Women, and she began organizing her sales agents into the state and local clubs. And the result was the National Beauty, Colorist, and Benevolent Association of Madam C.J. Walker Agents. And it was the predecessor to Madam C.J. Walker Beauty Colorist Union of America. So she really had this tremendous impact on women of color making it in unions and making it in jobs. And
she was so rad. She was so before her time in every way, you know?
And how popular is she? I mean, one of the things that you and I had was we were going to find a woman who was less prominently known. The name wasn't widely just assumed to be known.
Right. Well, you know, she is known, and I think she's more known now because of the Netflix series.
Yeah, well, we'll get into. Oh boy,
we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I think, you know, she's. I mean, what a legacy, honestly. And you know, she was a philanthropist. She empowered women. The other thing is, the majority of her employees were all women, and she, you know, a lot of senior women too, women who wouldn't otherwise been hired, perhaps. And they were all in these very powerful roles. She was constantly trying to get, you know, people to learn how to climb the ladder, to get, you know, to believe in themselves, and, you know, and there were so many ways you could be part of the company. She had a school, she had, you know, her business, she had, she did lectures. She had people in her company do lectures too. Yep. And all the while being this complete philanthropist, giving that money to organizations that empowered, you know, African Americans at that time.
Yeah, she gave a lot to the NAACP, and she helped fund the YMCA and She was really generous with her resources, very philanthropically minded.
Yeah, I mean, she really was. And unfortunately, it wasn't all easy. It wasn't all butterflies and bows, right?
Are you kidding?
Like, yeah. So
Yeah.
apparently, beauty in the Black community was still a controversial issue, unfortunately. White racists pointed to Black hair as evident that Black people were inferior.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is so insane. They argued that Black women who could not smooth out their kinky hair were unclean and messy.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Oh,
So for many Black women, using beauty products to smooth out their hair was a way of fighting back against racism and demonstrating their equality to white women.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But then, of course, on the other hand, there was those women, some advocates believed that by mimicking white hair fashions, Black women were catering to that racism. So again, very controversial. Two sides of the same sword. It was just, it was hard. And although, Madam Walker did sell products that helped straighten and smooth hair, she argued that her products were mostly about health. Because she had personally struggled with hair and scalp issues, she promoted healthy hair over a certain style of hair. It was all about making your hair healthy and strong.
And that's why she's our Sheela.
That's right.
That's why we both picked her.
Right. Healthy and strong, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, her reputation as an entrepreneur was only matched by her reputation for philanthropy. And she established clubs for her employees, encouraging them to give back to the communities and rewarding them with bonuses when they did. So not only was she giving back, she was encouraging all her employers to give back. And so most of her employees would give like a portion of what they made to various philanthropic organizations. And every time they did that, she would give them a bonus. So it was this cycle that she created, this whole cycle of philanthropy and betterment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And at a time, again, when jobs for Black women were fairly limited, she promoted female talent. And even stipulating in her company's charter that only a woman could serve as president of the company.
Woo! Go, Madam CJ.
I know. Go,
wow.
Yeah, you got to call her Madam CJ.
Madam CJ. Absolutely.
Madam CJ. But in 1916, she moved to New York to be closer to her daughter, where she already had a storied Harlem townhouse. And she built Villa Liwaro, a mansion in Irvington-on-Hudson designed by Black architect Vertner Tandy. And by 1917, the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company reported they had trained over 20,000 women again as sales agents. But I read earlier it was 40,000, so somewhere between 20 and 40,000, I'm going to say.
It's an impressive amount.
Yeah, so it is really impressive. And getting back to, Annie Malone for a moment.
Yes.
I just want to touch on, because, she was her competitor.
Right.
She worked for this woman. This woman, groomed her, no pun intended.
Right.
But groomed her, for success, for sales. And obviously she learned a lot. She also learned a lot from the women in her church. She kind of took every woman in her life and kind of made it, a chance to learn and to empower her, herself and to grow. And, but what was interesting is that their formula was almost identical.
Yes.
But it was not remarkable because the combination of, it was basically petroleum jelly and sulfur, and that combination had been used for nearly a century.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it still sparked animosity between the pair.
It did. It did spark animosity. However, and this is a point of contention. First of all, sadly, Walker died when she was 51 from kidney failure and complications of hypertension. And her remains, if anybody wants to visit her, is interred at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx.
Really?
Yep, in New York. Good old New York City. And at the time of her death, Walker was considered to be worth between $500,000 and $1 million. And she was the wealthiest woman in America. And according to Walker's obituary in the New York Times, she said herself 2 years earlier that she was not yet a millionaire, but hoped to be sometime. Not that she wanted the money for herself, but for the good she could do with it. And she did a tremendous amount of good.
Love you, madam.
Yes,
love you, Madam
you,
Sheela.
madam.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And her hair products are still available today.
Which is also amazing.
I know. They continue to be sold in drugstores, like, for a long time after her death. And then there was kind of this period of dormancy, and then the line was relaunched as Madame by Madam C.J. Walker in 2022. And her company still exists. And it's called Madam C.J. Walker Beauty Culture. And you can get the company's hair care products exclusively at Sephora.
Wow.
I don't know how I feel about that, but...
Well, the point is that
I mean, I like
she's...
Sephora, but...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It may not be your favorite, but look at the longevity of her impact and her ingenuity.
Right. And she's remembered, obviously, as this totally pioneering female entrepreneur who inspired many with her. She had financial independence, business acumen, philanthropy,
education. She really empowered and educated other women, other African American women, and just really was a dynamo.
Yeah, can you imagine if she was your mom?
Well, she did a lot for her own daughter because she brought her daughter into the business and helped her be successful. And let's talk about her great-great-granddaughter who wrote her biography and what happened, because I think that is an important asterisk to this whole story.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of you probably know about Madame C.J. Walker. But there was a Netflix miniseries called Self-Made that came out in 2020.
And it was based on her great-great-granddaughter's biography of her life story.
Mm-hmm. Some of you may have seen it. And, there were a lot of mixed reviews.
Yes.
And her great-granddaughter says that reading Self-Made the script, because apparently what happened is, so they were going to make this movie based on the book.
Which, by the way, is called On Her Own Ground. And I really want to encourage everybody who's interested to read that biography written by her great-great-granddaughter.
But, what's frustrating is basically she was shut out of the story development conversations in critical pitch meetings with Warner Brothers and Netflix. And, they allowed her to review the script and read the script, but they did not ask her for script approval. And there was no obligation for the production team to incorporate any of her suggestions, which is really shitty, I think.
Yep,
that's
totally
really
shitty.
Yeah. And so, of course, she did try to make some suggestions, but she got, a lot of pushback. And so when she read the script, she said it broke her heart. And her quote was, "I had been anticipating Hidden Figures. Instead, the Real Housewives of Atlanta was staring back at me from the page."
And what is so disappointing about that is that they just sensationalized it. They added things that weren't accurate and were inauthentic just to make it more, I guess they...
Hollywood.
Hollywood. They portrayed Anne Malone as like this villain, and they portrayed Madam's daughter as a lesbian. And not that that's bad, it's just inaccurate. And I guess here's the thing. Okay, here's the thing. We have
Tell us, April, what is the thing?
Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you what the thing is. This is an amazing story. She was an amazing woman. She was powerful in her own right. It didn't need any making up. It didn't need any fiction. It didn't need any more sexy backstory that never happened.
Right.
And why couldn't they just tell the friggin' story? Just salute
Would you
this...
say fucking story? Just say it again.
Okay, just tell the fucking story.
I like it when you say that. You kind of go into your New York accent. Just tell the fucking story.
Well, just tell the fucking story, because Madam C.J. Walker was a badass and she didn't need any dramatization. We didn't need to amplify the tension with her and Annie. Annie Malone and her did have conflict. She did start out. Okay, that was it. We didn't need to up it. We didn't need to start making lies about her family members and what her life was. Her life was colorful and interesting and dynamic and powerful all on its own. And it really pisses me off, quite frankly.
Really?
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
I can't tell.
Shut up.
Her great-granddaughter said that she just didn't believe that kind of profanity was the norm at that time. Mm-hmm. And, between, Annie Malone and Madam Walker, it was the 1900s, and both women were, of course, leading other black women in a kind of respectability, in politics. Mm-hmm. So that would have made, screaming profanities at one another. That just wouldn't happen.
No.
It wouldn't happen. And she was very distressed by that. And, again, she also said, the pitting of two black women against one another is something that the community expects when a Hollywood film, does it, but no one expected it when the chief filmmakers themselves were prominent African American women.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
It's disappointing.
Yeah.
It is. But the good news is Bundles. So we were talking about her great-granddaughter,
right.
Alelia Bundles.
Alelia Bundles.
She's completing a biography about Madam Walker's daughter, Alelia Walker. And it's called The Joy Goddess of Harlem. And it's out next year, which she hopes can be adapted to the screen as well, but this time with care and with her input.
I love that.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes.
Go. I'm so indebted to her great-great-granddaughter for telling her story. I'm just glad that she has family that is dedicated to telling an accurate and true story about a remarkable Sheela.
Right. I agree. I agree. And that is our Sheela of the day.
Yep.
Before we go, I'd like to take a word from today, and I'm going to give it to April.
Yeah.
And she's going to tell a quick story.
Oh,
whatever that word inspires.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So your word is granddaughter.
Granddaughter. Wow. What comes to mind with the word granddaughter is a memory that I have of my great-great-grandmother who lived to be over 100. And my memory of her was she was always in bed. Yeah, this little old lady with white hair.
Aww.
And she was blind and she was hard of hearing. So when we went into her apartment to see her, we'd have to go right up to her bed, so she could hear us. And she would stick her fingers onto our faces, my sister and I. And she would say, "Oh, so beautiful," which was really funny because, of course, she couldn't see. But somehow in her hands, she would touch our faces and tell us how beautiful we are.
Oh.
And her name was Grandma Rose. And interestingly enough, the perfect Sheela story with Madam C.J. Walker, she owned her own candy store. And she had an arranged marriage and she couldn't stand her husband. And so she kicked him out and ran her own candy store. And she was the breadwinner. She was a badass herself.
Aww.
And thank you for...
I think we should do an episode on Rose. Grandma Rose.
Unfortunately, I don't have a huge amount of information about her, but I have that vivid memory, which you just totally evoked. And it reminded me a little bit of Madam C.J. Walker, and that she also had a disappointing husband and rose above that and had her own business, and she was a pretty good badass lady.
I guess so.
Wow.
So how old was she when she went blind? What caused her blindness?
This is so funny, but I don't know. She was just always, ever since I could remember, she was always in bed, bedridden, always had white little hair, and always was completely blind, and always stuck her fingers in our face and said, "So beautiful."
Aww, that's so sweet. That is so sweet.
It's a shame I wasn't more curious earlier back when I could ask people. Now all of my family that could tell me about Rose is gone.
Right.
But I do have her photo, so I will...
Oh, we have to post it on our website.
Okay.
We'll post it. We're working on our website. We will post Grandma Rose on our website. And if you know any Sheelas that you think that we should talk about, by all means, let us know. There's so many out there, right?
There are.
Yeah. So again, thanks for listening. And until next time, we hope you do well and we hope you'll tune in. Thanks so much. Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Sheela, Sheela, Sheela.